Hi, I'm Scott Ditch, and thanks for checking out Ditch Ministries YouTube channel, where we keep things simple and we get right to the point. You know, when I was a young believer, just on fire for Jesus, I went through a divorce. And I was trying really hard to please God at the time, so the thought of condemning my life and upsetting God by getting a divorce, it scared me right to death. So I really dove deep into this subject to find out where God stands. And what I came up with is God hates divorce. He's even given us a commandment that says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And no one should split apart what God has joined together. That's where he stands. He's given us two acceptable reasons to get a divorce. A man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. Whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery, unless his wife has been unfaithful. So adultery is an acceptable reason to get a divorce. Now, I want to clean up a gray area here. If your spouse has committed adultery on you and they're apologizing and they want to stay with you, it's okay for you to stand your ground and say no. You know, manipulation is a terrible thing, and a lot of times cheaters are only sorry when they get caught. As a Christian, we believe that we have to forgive everyone. So we go and forgive them, and then they end up breaking our heart again. If you choose to stand your ground, it's okay. Another acceptable reason to get a divorce is through death. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives. If her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but only if he loves the Lord. If you're suffering physical abuse or great mental abuse and just living this miserable life, well, then you're free to leave. In 1 Corinthians 7, it says, "If the husband or wife who isn't a believer insists on leaving, let them go. In such cases, the believing husband or wife is no longer bound to the other, for God has called you to live in peace." So a good gauge of judgment here is Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans that I have for you. They're plans for good, not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." You see, abuse is not your future. Being ignored and unwanted and mentally abused, that's not a hope. But what do you do if you're married to an unbeliever and there is no abuse, there is no adultery? Well, in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 12 through 14, it goes right through it and explains it all. And I encourage you to go and read that. But the nuts and bolts of it is you stay with them. You know, maybe that marriage isn't exactly what you dreamed of. And maybe your spouse kind of makes life hard at times. But this is what it says in verse 17. "Each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you, and remain as you were when God first called you. Don't you wives realize that your husbands might be saved because of you?" So to put it in a nutshell, God hates divorce. He's given us two acceptable reasons to get a divorce. One of them is death. The other one is adultery. Even if your spouse is apologetic, okay, you can still forgive them, but there's a consequence for what they've done. Just like a criminal. If a criminal's broke into your house, you can forgive them for the act that they did, but there's still a price to pay. If we're married to an unbeliever and they want to leave, well, we can let them go. And we're not bound to them anymore. We're free to marry anybody we want as long as they're a believer. If we're married to somebody who's an unbeliever and they want to stay with us, well, you're going to stay with them.